If you're thinking about joining the world of DCC model railways, or you've just got yourself your first train set this Christmas and wondering what it's all about, then this video is the one for you. So there's a lot of debate out there about which method of model railway control is better. Is it DC or is it DCC? Now, me personally, I fall into the latter category of DCC. Now, everyone, I think pretty much everyone does start with DC. And then what happens is an alternative universe comes up where in one reality they diverge to DCC, and one is where they diverge and stay on the DC route. We're going to explore what happens when you explore the DCC route. So I suppose the best way to do this thing is to start from the beginning. What actually is DCC? DCC is a way of controlling your trains digitally. It stands for Digital Command Control, and it's been around for, in its early embryonic stages, for I'd say just over about 30 years or so, possibly a little bit short of a time period. But essentially what it boils down to is this. With a standard model railway train set you might get from Argos or whatever, the Hornby starter set, you've got a DC controller and you turn it left and the train goes left, you turn it right, the train goes right. Plug it into your wall, turn it on, bosh, away you go. Now, that's where the similarities sort of start to diverge. With DC, you're sort of controlling the track, you're controlling how much voltage goes to the track, and that dictates how fast and which direction the train goes in. With DCC, you're actually controlling the locomotive itself, which means you can have more locomotives on the track at once, and you can all have them doing different things at the same time. And that's just the beginning of it. You can do absolutely so many things with DCC, and it's not as complicated as a lot of people out there would have you believe. A lot of people out there are adamant that you must have DC and you must have an army of different control methods and isolating sections, and the argument that DCC is more complicated than DC, in my opinion, is absolute bollocks. And that's putting it mildly. It's really not complicated at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few bullet points that I've got written down on my trusty Mark 1 pen and paper pad here, and we're going to address them all one by one. I suppose the first thing that comes to many people's minds is when they decide to go DCC is which DCC system do we actually go for? There are absolutely dozens, if not hundreds of ways you can control your DCC model railway. I have got at least 3 here, and it's not about which is the best, because that will always be a subjective question and a subjective answer. No. What I would say is it's what's best for you. So I'm going to tell you the ones that I use, and I'll tell you why I use them and the benefits and the pros and the cons of each one. Now, when I first got started back into the hobby about 5 years ago, I got a DC starter set, funnily enough, and then decided I want to do this properly. I want to go DCC. So, like everyone, I didn't have a lot of money, and it's quite expensive and everything else. So I looked for a cheap, affordable DCC system, and I went for a Hornby Select. Now, there's a few issues with the Hornby Select as a system, and I don't think Hornby actually do it anymore. First being, it's not NMRA compliant. That's National Model Railway Association, and that is essentially a list of rules, if you will, that everyone in the DCC model railway tries to meet and sort of agrees on these set of standards. I mean, it's not set in stone, but it does help to make things more uniform. But that system wasn't, and Hornby designed it to really work with their own line of decoders, which we'll get onto in a minute. And it was also limited to how many addresses you could have and the type of address you could have, and it was quite a clunky thing with big harsh buttons, and there was no real good feedback. So I actually got quite frustrated with it, and I kept having loads of issues with short circuits and not enough power to run the trains. I did start to think that maybe DCC was a mistake and it's not the way for me. So I looked at something called JMRI, Java Model Railway Interface, and essentially it lets you control your model railway with a smartphone, which sounds absolutely fantastic, doesn't it, for all you kids out there that, you know, you're born with a screen in your face these days. However, whilst it might initially look like it's a really affordable and really powerful way to control your model railway, it's actually fraught with a lot of pitfalls and dangers. Not dangers, but a lot of problems you can potentially make. First and foremost being, really, you do need a laptop, and a Windows laptop at that. If you're on Mac or Linux, I don't think you can get JMRI. There might be an equivalent you can get, I'm sure there is. There is that, so that's sort of a downside. You also need to buy a Sprog, or another hardware device which literally connects your laptop to your track, so you can do the whole control thing. And of course you need a compatible mobile phone, usually an Android device. Once you've done that, you can run your trains and connect to your home Wi-Fi, and away you go. The benefit of this is you've got a roster with all your locomotives listed and all the functions listed by name, and you can customize it, no end, absolute no end to it. But because of that, the learning curve is really steep, and that can put a lot of people off. So that would be the sort of compromise with it. Another downside to it is, because you've got your mobile phone, you need to have your mobile phone always charged, and that can be a problem, because if you've got a separate device, that means you always have to have that secondary device on charge, and that can knacker the battery, because most smartphones use a lithium-ion battery and they don't do well being charged and discharged constantly. So you can sit and can't you? Think, oh, 70 quid for a Sprog 2, that's really good, but then you put 30 quid, 40 quid on there for a smartphone or a tablet, and then if you've not got one, a laptop for 150 quid, and all of a sudden it's the same as a proper DCC system. So what other systems is there? Well, I've also got an NCE power cab, and I've got that plugged into a DCC Concepts Aegis unit. And it's something I wish I did a long time ago, because it sort of goes back to that original setup I had with the Hornby Select, and that you've got a proper controller, and listen to here, you've got a proper controller and you've got proper nice buttons, but this one actually does have nice buttons on it, and you've got a nice roller ball, so you've got that nice haptic feedback, and you're doing a physical thing and you can see the locomotive reacting in real time rather than just pressing a screen. And a lot of people prefer that, and I can do both. I'm happy with both, but I'm starting to lean more towards this sort of a thing. For editing bulk CVs, which we'll get onto in a minute, it is easier having something like JMRI, but again, see previous points. Iron Horse Railways is proudly sponsored by Sawyer Models of Lee. There you will find quality used and new rolling stock from all the major gauges, all the way from Z to O gauge. They also carry an extensive selection of scenic items, including the WWS Scenic range, from static grasses all the way to grass tufts and all points in between. Of course, you can expect friendly service when you visit the store, but of course, if that's not your thing or you can't make it to the store, their website carries an extensive range of models and accessories from all the major scales. And thank you once again to Sawyer Models for being our sponsor. So the nice thing with having a proper control system is you've got dedicated power, you've got dedicated things like short circuit protection, which is really important for having all your model railway stuff not explode. So there is that as well. So again, do a bit of research on the system you want. Pretty much all of them connect to the track in the same way. One thing you do want to be careful of though, guys, is if you did start with DC and you want to move to DCC, there's a good chance your track came with a little power clip, right? Now, don't connect your DCC system to that power clip. It won't blow up, but they usually have like interference caps in them. So the issue with that is it can mess with the signal, the DCC signal, and your trains will act like absolute nutters and be completely unreliable, and it will blow decoders and pop capacitors, and I just didn't know what the issue was. That's what it was. So if you do go DCC, start fresh with the track connection. So now, decoders. DCC decoders. Now, your trains, or your locomotives, do need something else in order for them to work. You can't just put a DC locomotive or out of the box DCC ready locomotive, as you will often see these days, or an old Triang thing from your granddad's loft, and put it on a DCC track, because it will make an horrific sound, a horrible high-pitched scream, because the motor doesn't know what to do with the signal it's receiving. The motor is being told to go backwards and forwards pretty much at the same time, 1,000,000 times per second. So the motor's vibrating and freaking out, and it doesn't know what to do. Now, if your loco's been on the track for a couple of seconds, it's not the end of the world. You can just take it off and then put it away. But keeping it on there for a while will cause problems. You can get some DCC systems out there which claim to be able to let you run a DC locomotive on a DCC railway, but I wouldn't recommend doing that for long term, because it will damage the motor eventually. What you can do actually with a lot of DCC decoders is you can set them to be able to run on DC. So if your mate's got a DC layout, you can take your DCC locomotives and run them on DC. Again, it's not great, but it's doable. But you can't do it the other way around. You cannot run DC on a DCC layout, which is why you need a decoder. And yes, you can upgrade your granddad's old loft stock that has been up there for the past 30-40 years, but it can be a little bit difficult. A lot of older locomotives have old motors, and they can draw a lot of power. So if you're going to run really old stock and you want to DCC fit them, you really need to pay attention to the power output of the decoders you're using, because it is super easy to fit one of these to an old Triang or 00 locomotive, or even an old Lima, and just watch it go poof, and it lets all the magic smoke out, and you've wasted 30 quid, and you've got to go and buy another decoder. And that sort of thing isn't covered under warranty. However, I've always found that if you're open with the vendor that you've spoken to, and this is where buying from a reputable vendor helps, explain the situation, they will often help you out. Now, I'm not saying they will just give you another decoder for free, but they may do a discount or help you out or offer to get your decoder repaired, because that is sometimes possible. So there's different types of decoders out there. You've got sound decoders, which when paired with a speaker will make your locomotive make pretty sounds, make it sound like a real engine. Then you've got basic DCC decoders. All of them have something called CVs, which are configuration values, and these are essentially a set of rules or settings, if you will, within the chip itself, which tell your locomotive how to behave when you tell it to do something. So how fast it will accelerate when you twist the knob, if you will, how fast it will slow down when you turn the speed step back to 0. Do you have to brake with a brake button? Will it brake on its own? How loud the sound is on sound decoders? There's thousands of little settings, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. But thankfully, for the most part, the average person probably won't even need to adjust any CVs apart from changing the address, which is the next topic of point. Is all your locomotives will have their own unique ID number. Remember before how we said that with DC you control the track and DCC you control the locomotive? Well, with the decoder, that's how you do it. Quite simple. You get your decoder. Now, if you've got a modern locomotive, it'll be DCC ready. So make sure you've got the right type of pin locomotive. So it might be 6-pin, 8-pin, 21-pin, whatever. Make sure it's the right type. Buy your decoder, open your locomotive, pop your decoder in. Simple as that. And you're ready to go. Your locomotive is now DCC fitted. You'll get a little blanking pin usually. That is not a decoder. That is just so it runs on DC. Remove that carefully. Don't bend your pins. Be very, very careful. And once you've put your locomotive in there, you can give it a new address. Now, it does help to have a separate, what they call a programming track. Because if you send a command to your locomotive on the track, and there's other locomotives on the track, sometimes they can read that command and it will affect everything on the track, which you don't want to do. Again, that's another issue with things like JMRI. You've really got to have a separate programming track for that. But having a separate programming track is good practice anyway, because it lowers the voltage and it reduces the risk of any damage. So assign your locomotive an address. It's different for every DCC system. Usually it involves setting CV1 to a different number, or if you want a 4-digit number, again, a really good system like PowerCab will just do it for you. and it takes all the headache out of changing every little CV. Once your locomotive has got its ID, it's ready to run, and that's it. So far, we've got a DCC system, we've hooked it up to our track, we've got our locomotive, and we've put a decoder in and give it an address. That's it. You are ready to use your DCC model railway. That's it. You don't have to do anything else, guys. And that's the problem. There's a lot of myths out there from the anti-DCC crowd that would have you believe that, oh, you must have this and you need to have this and you need to get that. And even from the DCC lads themselves, you must have all these extras and these expensive bits and pieces. You don't really. If you just want to have a basic layout with 2, 3, maybe 4 locomotives, and you just want it to be humble and enjoy running your trains, then yeah, those 4 things are all you need. It is as simple as that. That's all I had for years, really. But then, of course, you get into it, don't you? And then you got all the extras, but we'll speak about them a bit later on. So, myth number 1, DCC is complicated. No, it's not. We spoke about this just before at the start of the video. DCC is literally 2 wires. It is 2 wires. If you look at the bottom of my system here, you've got the big complicated Aegis system underneath there, and it looks very frightening and things, but there's 2 wires coming out of that. And one goes to the left rail and one goes to the right rail. And you turn the power on and bosh, you're away. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as DC in that regard. So there's no real difference. So no, DCC isn't complicated at the core. It's very accessible and very easy to use. There's lots of room for things to go wrong with DCC. Well, to be fair with you, there's lots of things to go wrong with DC as well. You've got to do a lot more wiring with DC. If you want to do all the fancy control things like having a locomotive pull into a station, whilst the other locomotive doesn't fly off down the track, you've got to put isolating sections in and mess about with switches and buttons and a lot more wiring involved with DC. Again, with DCC, you don't have all that wiring. Your locomotive just sits there and waits for its address to be called. So you can park one locomotive next to another one, it'll just wait there. So again, there is potential for things to go wrong, but you can say that about DC as well. So that's not an exclusive issue to DCC. You need to be able to solder to do DCC. Again, no you don't. If you watched my last video, you saw me install really high quality point motors and I didn't have to solder anything, not a single thing. And if you're worried about having to solder things to your track, again, you don't need to, because companies like, fun enough, DCC Concepts make little fish plates, which are the little metal clips, by the way, if you're new to this, which will connect your track together. They make fish plates with wires on them already, dropper wires, which you just, guess what, plug straight into your DCC system. That's it. You don't need to solder. And if you get modern locomotives, you don't even need to solder a decoder in anymore, which is what you used to have to do years and years ago. You don't have to do it anymore. Take the body off, chip in, job gone. So no, you don't need to solder. Although I will say this, soldering really isn't as frightening as people make out to be. It's not a big dark art, guys. Plenty of heat, don't get a cheap iron. Really hot iron, you know, one that can get up to 480 degrees. Good solder and a decent flux as well. That's what you want. Don't skimp on your solder, don't skimp on the iron, and get a decent flux. If you skip out on any one of those 3 steps, you're gonna have a bad time and you're gonna think soldering's crap, I'm crap, why am I doing this? Anyway, that's a different video entirely. DC is cheaper than DCC. Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, if we're talking about just basic railway stuff and you just want to get a train and run it on a layout and watch it chase its tail, yeah, that's fine. But if you're going to do that, why would you need to go to DCC? If you're just going to run one locomotive on its own all the time and never run a second locomotive at the same time, then yeah, you could just stay DC. But then you wouldn't be watching this video, would you? Yes, there is an additional cost with the DCC systems. They do tend to be a bit more money. And of course, there is a cost involved with the decoders, some of which can be up to 130 quid, depending on if it's a really high quality sound decoder. But again, you don't have to do that. You can just quite happily sit there running your locomotives like we discussed earlier on in this video. So again, cost, it can be more expensive, but ultimately it's only as expensive as you want it to be. Ultimately, it is up to you, boys and girls. I really enjoy DCC, and for me, it is the embodiment of what a modern model railway should be. It lets you enjoy your locomotives in a way that was hitherto undreamed of 30 years ago. When I was a lad, someone told me you can have your model trains making sounds and doing their own things, so you can do shunting in the yard, and you can have things like stay alives. You can have things like push button control for your point motors, so there's no need to have switches and buttons everywhere. You just press a button and the point changes. It's like magic. It's fantastic, and it's not complicated either. This thing here, this is the Alpha Central from DCC Concepts. This just plugs into your Aegis unit or to your power cab unit with a little cable, and it's as simple as that. Just plug straight in, and it's already pre-addressed, so you just set your point motors to set, press a button, set it to run, and that button changes your point motor. It is literally child's play. My 12-year-old daughter could do it. It's not complicated. And as someone that struggles to read instructions, and I get a little bit fuzzy in the head when I just see line after line of words and diagrams and fig 1 and fig 6, it just fries me head. Even a troll-like figure such as myself could master DCC with a little bit of patience, and I don't have a lot of that, and get the best out of it. Not to mention, again, if you find yourself a really good retailer, a friendly retailer, and don't just bleed them for information, because information isn't free, boys and girls. It does take time and effort to explain something. But if you make friends with your retailer and let them know you want to get into the hobby, and you promise not to nickel and dime them and go on Amazon for absolutely everything because it's 10 quid cheaper, don't forget that if something's a little bit more expensive from a brick and mortar shop, there is a reason for that. It's because you've got somewhere to go to if it goes wrong, or you have a problem, or there's an issue with the lighting on one of your coaches, for example. If you bought it on eBay or Amazon, good luck to you. I don't think it's really fair that you should bring it to your local model shop who didn't buy it from and expect them to tell you how to fix it for free. That's not cricket, boys and girls. It's not the way forward. However, if you do go to your local model railway shop and ask them for help and get all your bits and pieces and particulars from them, then guess what? If they're a decent model railway shop, then they'll be more than happy to help you. Again, that's why I partnered up with Sawyer Models, because they are a fantastic local model railway shop and they do pretty much everything I've just said. They're the benefit to staying local, folks. Now, I really hope you've enjoyed this, and if you've just sort of got into model railways and you're thinking of going DCC but you're sort of panicking because of how scary everything reads online, and you're looking at forums on RM Web and wherever and Facebook, and there's page after page after page of people arguing about what CV setting to have for your locomotive's acceleration rate, and your head's just sort of mincing together into a pile of mush. Calm down. It's properly easy and simple. Super easy. Just literally connect your wires to your track. And if you can't solder, get fish plates with a drop of wires in them. You don't even need to drill a hole if you don't want to. I mean, you can just run the wires to the edge of the baseboard if you need to. Simple as that. Ultimately, I want you all to enjoy your DCC and your DC model railways as well. If you found this video entertaining, guys, please do give it a like, a comment down below, share, and of course subscribe, because it helps me out no end. Now, I'm going to go play with my model railway. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and I'll see you all later on. Take care. Bye-bye.